Today, I want to share a story so powerful it reshaped an entire frontier town, set beneath the wide skies of the American West, where courage was rare and kindness was dangerous. This was a place where destinies collided between fire and water, fear and faith. And it all began with a single moment of humanity, small in appearance, yet strong enough to challenge hatred itself. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The stagecoach bucked hard as its wheels dropped into another deep groove carved into the dry Wyoming trail. The sudden jolt sent Elora Finch's worn carpetbags sliding across the wooden floor. She braced herself with a gloved hand against the window frame, while her other hand tightened around the folded letter that had drawn her to this isolated stretch of frontier land. Through the dusty glass, she caught her first sight of Cedar Falls, a small cluster of sun-beaten buildings crouched against the vast prairie, as if the land itself had tried to swallow them and failed. "That's the end of the line, miss," the driver called down, his voice as rough as the road behind them. "Mind your step." Elora gathered her belongings, 2 modest bags holding everything she owned, including the books she valued more than clothing or coin. The late afternoon light stretched long shadows across the main street, staining the ground in amber and dust. She paused, absorbing the place she would now call home. The general store sagging beneath its own porch, the saloon spilling loud laughter into the street, and the small church whose crooked steeple pierced the sky like a warning. "You must be the new schoolteacher," a woman's voice said, quiet, cautious. Elora turned to see a slender woman in a faded calico dress, her face etched early by sun and worry. "I'm Willa Ashcroft," she said. "My husband's the preacher." Her smile tried, but never quite reached her eyes. "We've been expecting you," Willa continued, lowering her voice. "But you should know, Cedar Falls isn't Philadelphia." Before Elora could reply, the saloon doors burst open. 3 men staggered into the street, their laughter sharp and cruel. The largest of them, a broad-shouldered man with a crooked sheriff's badge pinned to his vest, noticed the 2 women and turned toward them. "Well now," he drawled, showing teeth stained dark with tobacco. "Looks like the Eastern lady finally arrived." "Sheriff Knox Rourke," he said. "You'll want to pay your respects to Judge Alton Crowley once you're settled. He decides how things run around here." Willa's fingers tightened around Elora's arm. "The judge prefers things done his way, Miss Finch." "I'm sure we'll manage," Elora replied evenly, though unease crept up her spine. "I've come to teach children, nothing more." Rourke laughed, the sound dry and grating. "Teaching's one thing. Teaching the right lessons is another. The judge has got strong opinions about what belongs in young heads." The schoolhouse sat at the far edge of town, a plain, unpainted structure that looked abandoned by time itself. Tall weeds crowded the steps. Several windows were cracked. Inside, dust floated through narrow beams of light like restless spirits. Willa helped carry Elora's bags inside. "It needs work," Willa said quietly. "The last teacher didn't stay long." "What happened to her?" Elora asked. Willa hesitated, opening windows as if the air itself needed permission to move. She wanted to teach Apache children alongside the others. Judge Crowley didn't tolerate that idea. She lowered her voice further. "The Apache aren't welcome here anymore." Elora set her bag down slowly. "Children learn what their parents teach them to fear." Willa glanced toward the door. "The judge lost his son in a raid 15 years ago, or so he claims. Since then, he's made it his mission to keep the Apache far from Cedar Falls." That night, Elora unpacked by lamplight in the small room behind the schoolhouse that would serve as her home. Readers, arithmetic books, a carefully folded atlas. Each one carried hope, the belief that minds could be opened even in hard places. Outside, saloon lights flickered. A battered piano played the same broken tune again and again. A knock came at the door. A boy stood outside, no more than 10, his eyes alert and cautious. "Ma'am, I'm Finn Pikehurst," he said. "My pa runs the forge." He handed her a covered basket. "Ma said you'd need supper." "That's very kind," Elora said. "Would you like to come in?" He shook his head quickly. "Pa says I shouldn't linger." He glanced down the street. "Just be careful what you teach. Judge Crowley's got ears everywhere." The next morning, Elora rose before dawn. She swept years of dust from the floor, scrubbed the windows until they caught the light, and lined the desks in careful rows. When the church bell rang 8 times, she stood at the steps and watched a small group of children approach. Slow, uncertain. They ranged from 6 to 14. Farm kids mostly. Patched clothes, guarded eyes. The boys whispered together. The girls clutched their lunch pails. "Good morning," Elora called, her voice steady, shaped by years in crowded classrooms back east. "I'm Miss Finch. Please come in and choose a desk." They obeyed in silence, sitting as far from her as possible. 12 students. Fewer than she'd hoped, but it was a beginning. She moved to the chalkboard. "Let's start with names. When I call you, stand and tell us your age." One by one they rose. She listened carefully, memorizing each voice, each face, aware that this was only the first test in a place where knowledge itself could be dangerous. One by one, the children obeyed. Names echoed through the room: Pikehurst, Voss, Talon, Moore. Farm names, settler names, carved from dust and routine. When Elora finished, Elswyn Moore slowly raised her hand, fingers trembling slightly. "Miss Finch, you ain't planning on teaching us alongside no Indians, are you?" She swallowed. "Pa says they're savages. Says they'd just as soon scalp you as look at you." The room stiffened. Every child turned toward Elora, waiting. She recognized the moment for what it was. Her first true trial. "We're here to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic," Elora said carefully. "Every child deserves an education. I understand your parents have fears. We'll take things one day at a time." The tension eased, but it did not disappear. As the days passed, Elora settled into a rhythm. Mornings for the younger children, afternoons for the older ones. She quickly learned that most of them could barely read. Their schooling before her arrival had been scattered and careless. Yet beneath their guarded silence was an eagerness she hadn't expected. It was during her second week that Judge Alton Crowley first appeared. He filled the doorway like a gathering storm. Tall, narrow, silver-haired, with eyes sharp and cold as winter glass. He surveyed the classroom with ownership, as though it already belonged to him. "Miss Finch," he said smoothly, "I regret not welcoming you sooner. Matters of justice demand much of my attention." His refined voice clashed with the rough timber walls around him. "I trust you are settling in well." "Quite well," Elora replied, standing and smoothing her skirt. "The children are eager to learn." "Eager to learn the right lessons, I hope." His boots struck the floor as he stepped inside. "You've heard, no doubt, about our troubles with the local savages." "I've heard there have been conflicts." He smiled thinly. "Conflicts. A polite word. Murder suits it better. Theft. Attacks on innocent settlers." He lifted one of her books, flipping through it with visible disdain. "I trust you won't fill young minds with foolish tales about noble Indians. The Apache are a disease upon this land, Miss Finch. They must be handled accordingly." "I teach facts, Judge Crowley," she said steadily, "not opinions." "Facts," he repeated, setting the book down with care. "The fact is, this town exists because strong men carved it from wilderness. Men who understood civilization and savagery cannot coexist." His gaze locked onto hers, measuring, unyielding. "I believe we understand one another." After he left, Elora lowered herself into her chair, her hands shaking despite her effort to steady them. Willa Ashcroft's warnings rang loudly in her thoughts. Through the window, she watched Crowley cross the street, townsfolk stepping aside to let him pass. Like a prophet parting the sea, she thought, if prophets ruled by fear. That night, sleep refused her. She wrote letters by lamplight, one to her sister back east, filled with bright half-truths about opportunity and purpose. Another to a former colleague, far more honest about the hostility she faced. Outside, coyotes cried across the plains, their voices sharp and lonely. Dustreach might be small, isolated, poisoned by one man's hatred. But Elora Finch had not crossed 2,000 miles to teach fear. Whatever Crowley expected, whatever the town demanded, she would plant knowledge and compassion in this unforgiving soil, even if it cost her everything. Autumn arrived with a cutting chill. 3 weeks after her arrival, Elora felt the poison woven deep into Dustreach's bones. It surfaced in small gestures. Mothers pulling children close when Apache traders passed, men spitting curses into the dirt, shopkeepers refusing service to dark skin and braided hair. During geography lessons, Breck Talon raised his hand. "Miss Finch, why does the map show Indian territory? Pa says it won't be there much longer." "The treaties establish," Elora began. "My uncle says treaties ain't worth the paper they're written on," Elswin interrupted. "Says Judge Crowley knows how to deal with them proper." Heads nodded, young faces already shaped by borrowed hatred. Elora felt her chest tighten. How could she teach compassion to children raised on fear? "Let's return to our arithmetic," she said quietly, but the damage lingered. After class, Willa Ashcroft waited outside, a basket of mending on her arm. She had become Elora's only true friend in Dustreach, though fear seemed to shadow her constantly. "Walk with me," Willa said softly. "There are things you need to know." They walked toward the edge of town, where buildings gave way to endless grass. Willa glanced around before speaking. "Judge Crowley wasn't always like this. 15 years ago, he was just another settler trying to survive. Then came Willow Creek. The raid where his son died." Willa's smile was bitter. "That's what he calls it. But my husband was there. He tended the wounded himself." Willa lowered her voice further. "It wasn't a raid at all," she said. "A small group of Apache came to trade. Peaceful, no trouble intended. But Thane Crowley, the judge's son, he was drunk, started arguing over a horse, drew his gun first." She hesitated, glancing at the open land beyond the town. The Apache defended themselves. Thane died. So did 2 other men who joined the shooting. But Judge Crowley couldn't accept that his boy caused it. So he changed the story. A cold settled into Elora's chest, nothing to do with the breeze sweeping the grass. The town believed him. He already had money. He already had influence. Who would dare challenge a man like that? Once the lie took hold, it spread fast. Every missing cow, every broken fence, all of it blamed on the Apache. "Fear gave him power," Willa said helplessly. "And now the hatred's real, even if the truth never was." That afternoon, Elora watched from the schoolhouse window as a small group of Apache entered Dustreach. 2 men, 3 women, several children. Their wagon was piled with buffalo hides meant for trade. The Dustreach folk scattered as if a storm had rolled through town. Mothers dragged children indoors. Men reached for rifles they had no need to use. One Apache girl, no older than Elora's youngest students, glanced toward the schoolhouse and lifted her hand in a shy wave. Elora returned it before thinking better of it. Too late. Sheriff Knox Rourke had seen. Moments later, heavy boots thundered up the steps. Rourke filled the doorway, his face flushed with drink and anger. Likely both. "You encouraging them savages now, schoolmarm?" he growled. "I waved at a child," Elora said evenly. "Nothing more." "That's how it starts." He leaned against the frame, the wood groaning beneath his weight. "First waving, then teaching them alongside decent folks' kids. Then they're stealing land, cattle, women." "They were here first," Elora said quietly. His hand slammed the wall, making her flinch. "Watch that Eastern tongue, Miss Finch. Judge Crowley don't take kindly to Indian sympathizers. Ask what happened to the last teacher if you doubt me." After he left, Elora's hands shook as she tried to grade papers. That evening, she went to see Dr. Silas Wendell, one of the few in Dustreach who seemed untouched by the town's sickness. She found him in his small office, grinding medicine by lamplight. He looked up, eyes tired but kind. "Miss Finch," he said, "I hope you're not ill." "I'm looking for answers," she replied, "about the teacher before me." He sighed, setting down his tools. "Rebecca Marsh, young, idealistic, much like you. She believed education could close the gap between our peoples. She taught Apache children in secret after regular lessons." "What became of her?" "Judge Crowley called it betrayal, had her arrested on theft charges, fabricated, of course, gave her a choice, leave town at once or face trial." Dr. Wendell met Elora's gaze. "She left, but not before Rourke and Crowley's spur destroyed her belongings, burned her books, a warning." Elora walked home as dusk settled over Dustreach. The square stood empty, except for a few men drifting toward the saloon. Passing the general store, she noticed a fresh sign nailed inside the window. "No Indians served." By order of Judge Crowley. That night, the wind howled across the plains. Elora lay awake, thinking of the people camped somewhere beyond the town. Families telling their children stories of loss and injustice. Children denied books simply because of who they were. The weight of it pressed on her chest. The following day brought an unexpected knock. Orrin Pikehurst, the blacksmith, stood on her step during the noon hour. A large man with gentle eyes. He twisted his hat between calloused hands. "Miss Finch," he said, uneasy. "May I speak plain?" "Of course. My boy, Finn. He's taken to your teaching. Talks about places he's never seen. Ideas I never learned myself." He paused, choosing each word. "Not everyone in Dustreach stands with Judge Crowley." Elora studied him. "That's a dangerous thing to admit." "Yes, ma'am, it is." He nodded once. "Some of us remember when Apache and settlers traded fair. Some of us believe hate poisons the one carrying it." He drew a breath. "You're not alone. Dr. Wendell, the Moores, a few others. We keep quiet for our families. But maybe it's time these children learned another way." After he left, a fragile spark of hope stirred in Elora's chest. But when she returned to her classroom, she found Judge Alton Crowley waiting, standing over her desk, turning her books with visible contempt. "Ah, Miss Finch," Judge Alton Crowley said, his voice smooth and sharp at once. "I've been receiving troubling remarks about the way you conduct your classroom." "I wasn't aware spelling and arithmetic had become matters of concern," Elora replied. His smile held no warmth. "Don't play clever with me." He lifted one of her history books, thumbing through the pages with exaggerated distaste. Eastern thinking, soft ideas, printed lies that ignore how the frontier truly works. He snapped the book shut. "Allow me to educate you, Miss Finch. The Apache stand in the way of progress. They occupy land meant to be farmed, hoard resources meant to be claimed. They cling to heathen beliefs and resist civilization at every turn. They're people," Elora said evenly, "with families, traditions, rights, Rights, his voice cut sharply upward. They have none. They exist because we tolerate them, and that tolerance is running out. He stepped closer. The sharp stink of tobacco filled her lungs. I built this town from dirt and fear. I've kept it safe from savagery for 15 years. I won't have some Eastern schoolteacher undermine that work with naive sympathies. He turned and left without another word. Elora stood trembling, anger locked tight in her chest. Through the window, she watched Crowley cross the square, the Dustreach folk stepping aside as if he were royalty, and they peasants. That afternoon, the hostility in her classroom sharpened. Word of the judge's visit had traveled fast. In Dustreach, nothing stayed quiet for long, and the children took it as permission. "My pa says Apaches steal children," Jedrick Fenn blurted out. "Says they raise 'em wild and make 'em forget they were ever white." "That's enough," Elora said firmly, but the boy pressed on. "He says Judge Crowley's gonna drive 'em all out. Says the army's coming. Says it'll be like cleaning vermin from a barn." Several children nodded eagerly, thrilled by violence they were far too young to understand. Elora felt sick. These were children, some barely able to write their names, already being shaped into weapons of hatred. As daylight shortened and winter crept closer, the air in Dustreach grew thick with menace. Judge Crowley began hosting regular gatherings at the town hall, fueling fear with stories of Apache attacks. Most exaggerated, many outright false. The few members of the people who still dared to trade were met with insults, sometimes fists, sometimes worse. Elora continued teaching, but each day weighed heavier than the last. How could learning take root in soil poisoned by hate? How could compassion survive where it was mocked as weakness? Late one evening, as she prepared lessons by lamplight, Willa Ashcroft appeared at her door. The preacher's wife looked pale, her eyes darting into the darkness behind her. "There's talk," she whispered. "Judge Crowley's planning something big. He's been meeting with men from other towns, men known for solving Apache problems permanently." "The authorities," Elora began. "He is the authority," Willa cut in. "And powerful men want the land. They don't care how it's cleared, only that it is." Willa disappeared into the night, leaving Elora standing in the doorway, staring at the sleeping town. Beyond the ring of buildings, innocent lives were marked for destruction, simply for existing. And here, children were being taught that such cruelty was righteous. Elora returned to her desk, unable to focus. Her thoughts drifted instead to the Apache girl who had waved at the schoolhouse. Where was she now? Did she dream of learning to read? Of understanding the symbols that carried power in the white man's world? A decision took shape. Elora could not save the territory. She could not stop the tide of hatred men like Judge Crowley had unleashed. But perhaps, just perhaps, she could save one child. She did not yet know how, or what the cost would be. But as the prairie wind howled outside her small circle of lamplight, Elora Finch resolved to stand against the darkness consuming Dustreach. The storm arrived without mercy. Lightning split the sky. Thunder rattled the schoolhouse walls. Rain battered the roof like fists demanding entry. Near midnight, Elora huddled beside her stove, grating papers when she heard it. A sound swallowed by the storm. A weak scraping at the door. Then a dull thud. She froze, recalling Sheriff Knox Rourke's threats and Judge Crowley's warnings. Yet the sound carried desperation deeper than fear. She unlatched the door, fighting the wind as it tore against her grip. A body collapsed at her feet. A boy, 12, perhaps 13. Buckskin clothes soaked through with rain and something darker. Blood streamed from wounds in his shoulder and side, pooling onto her floor. "Please," he whispered in broken but clear English, eyes wide with pain. "Help!" Without hesitation, Elora dragged him inside, her dress darkening with his blood as the storm raged on. Elora locked the door and dropped to her knees beside him, her hands moving on instinct. The boy was Apache. His braided hair, buckskin clothing, and sharp young features marked him as one of the people Judge Crowley had taught Dustreach to despise. "What's your name?" she asked gently, lighting another lamp to better see the damage. "Keme," he whispered. "White men call me Joseph." "I'm going to help you, Joseph," she said softly. "But you must stay quiet. Can you do that?" He nodded, jaw clenched as she carefully cut away the ruined shirt. The sight beneath made her stomach twist. A bullet had torn through his shoulder. A knife wound split the flesh along his ribs. Bruises bloomed across his skin, old and new. This wasn't random cruelty. It was deliberate violence. Elora worked through the night, relying on lessons learned long ago beside her physician father. She cleaned the wounds with whiskey from her medicine chest, heated her tools in flame, and drew the bullet free with steady hands. She stitched torn flesh using thread meant for mending clothes. Kemi endured it all in silence, only small sounds escaping when pain overwhelmed him. By dawn, she finished bandaging him and eased him onto her narrow bed. Feverish, but alive. She pulled a chair close, too exhausted and too frightened to sleep. "Keme," she whispered, "what happened? Where is your family?" Tears slipped from the corners of his eyes. "Men with guns came. Mother took my baby sister, told me to run. They followed." His voice cracked. "I hid in the river, floated far. Came here because I remembered the teacher who waved." Elora's chest tightened. She was that teacher, the one small act of kindness that had given this boy hope. "Your mother and sister?" she asked carefully. "Where would they go?" "Caves in the northern hills. Safe place once. Soldiers everywhere now." His eyes opened wider. "Judge Crowley said we stole cattle. Said we killed a white man. Lies." "My father never stole," Keem whispered. "He traded fair, worked hard. They killed him because the judge wanted our land. Good water, good grass." The truth struck Elora with crushing weight. This wasn't about order. It wasn't protection. It was murder for profit. "You're safe now," she said, though she knew it wasn't true. There was no safety in Dustreach for an Apache boy who carried the truth. She moved through the day in a state of quiet panic, teaching her classes while Kime lay hidden behind the schoolhouse walls. Every footstep outside set her heart racing. When Willa Ashcroft arrived after lessons, Elora nearly sagged with relief. "Willa," she whispered, pulling her inside. "I need your help. What I'm about to show you could put you in danger." Willa's face drained of color when she saw Keme, but she didn't run. "Oh, Lord," she murmured. "The raids last night. My husband heard men boasting, calling it a victory." She knelt beside the bed, fear giving way to care. "This isn't war. It's murder. He says his mother and sister escaped," Elora said. "They're hiding in caves north of here." "The old miller's claim," Willa said quietly. "I know it." She examined the bandages. "If they find him here—" "I know," Elora said, "but I can't turn him out. He'll die." Willa was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. "My root cellar. It's separate from the house, hidden. We can move him after dark. I'll bring food. Medicine. Oren won't like the risk. Oren Pikehurst has been praying for the courage to stand against this evil," Willa said firmly. "Perhaps this boy is the answer." They made their plans quickly. Willa would prepare the hiding place and gather supplies. Elora would keep Keme hidden until nightfall. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. The afternoon dragged on. Kame drifted in and out of fevered sleep, sometimes crying out in his own language. Elora sat beside him, cooling his brow with water, whispering comfort he might not understand, but might feel. As the sun dipped low, he stirred. "Teacher," he said, stronger now, "why do you help me? Your people hate mine." "They're not my people," Elora said without hesitation. "Fear and hatred don't decide that. Kindness does. Compassion does." "You're a child who needs help," she said. "That's all that matters." Kame studied her with eyes far older than his years. "My father said there were good white people." "My mother didn't believe him," he said softly. "She said goodness can't grow in poisoned soil." A faint smile touched his lips. Maybe she was wrong. Heavy boots suddenly thundered up the steps. Elora barely had time to pull a blanket over Keem and push him deeper into the shadows before Sheriff Knox Rourke crashed through the door without knocking. "Search the place," he snapped to the two men behind him. "Judge Crowley's orders." Elora stepped forward, blocking them. "You have no right. This is my home." "Not anymore," Rourke sneered. "We got word you're hiding an Apache, a murderer, the one who killed Corbin Halleck last night." "That's impossible," Elora said. "I've been here alone." "Save the lies, schoolmarm." He shoved past her as his men spread out, tearing through the room. Her desk was overturned, books thrown aside, clothes ripped open by filthy hands. Elora held her breath as one man drifted toward the corner where Keem lay hidden. The blanket offered little cover, and his shallow breathing sounded deafening to her ears. Then a figure appeared in the doorway. "Sheriff," Orrin Pikehurst said urgently. "Judge wants you at the jail. Says they caught one trying to steal horses." Rourke cursed under his breath. "Watch her," he barked at one man, then stormed out with the other. The remaining deputy lingered, young and uneasy. Elora recognized him at once. Calder Voss, older brother to one of her students. "Calder," she said quietly. "You know me. You know I'm no criminal." He shifted, uncomfortable. "Orders are orders, Miss Finch. Can't cross Judge Crowley." "I'm not asking you to," she said gently. "But would you check the front window? I thought I saw someone out there." The moment he turned his back, Elora seized the heavy bookend and struck him hard at the base of the skull. Calder collapsed without a sound. She stood frozen, shaking, stunned by what she had done. There was no time to think. "Keme," she whispered. "We have to go, now!" Together they dragged Calder behind the desk. He was breathing, steady. She'd been careful. With luck, he'd wake with nothing worse than a pounding head and a bruised pride. The storm had returned, masking their escape as they slipped out the back door. Kame leaned heavily against her, each step agony. They stayed close to the shadows, moving slowly towards the Ashcroft house. Willa Ashcroft met them at the root cellar, Orrin beside her holding a lantern. The blacksmith lifted Kem as gently as if he were made of glass and carried him down into the hidden space. It was cramped but dry, already stocked with blankets, food, and medicine. "This is madness," Orrin muttered. "When they find out," Willa said firmly, "we'll face it together." Elora knelt beside Kime, checking his wounds. The journey had reopened some cuts, but nothing fatal. "Rest now," she said softly. "We'll find a way to get you back to your mother." He caught her hand. "Teacher. My true name is Kem. It means friend to all. My father chose it, said I would build bridges between people." "Then you will," Elora said. "We'll make sure you live long enough to do it." As she climbed back into the storm, Elora knew there was no turning back. She had struck a deputy, hidden a fugitive, defied Judge Alton Crowley himself. Morning would bring consequences, but looking at Willa and Orrin, seeing resolve burning through their fear, She felt something she hadn't known since arriving in Dustreach. Hope. Not everyone here was poisoned by hatred. "Go home," Oren told her. "Act normal. When they come, and they will, deny everything. Calder was drunk, confused." "I won't let you take the blame," Elora said. "Wouldn't be the first time I stood against Crowley," Oren replied grimly. "Now go, before someone sees you." Elora slipped back through the rain, soaked and shaking. In her quarters, she positioned Calder more comfortably and set a bottle of whiskey near his hand. Let them think he'd been drinking on duty. She sat at her desk as if grading papers, though her hands trembled too badly to write. Outside, the storm broke apart, stars piercing the racing clouds. Somewhere in the darkness, a wounded Apache boy named Kemi lay hidden, alive, clinging to hope. Somewhere else, his mother and sister hid in caves, praying for mercy. And here in Dustreach, 3 ordinary people had chosen to stand against evil, knowing the cost might be everything. The die was cast. Tomorrow would bring Judge Crowley's wrath. But tonight, just for this moment, compassion had won a small, fragile victory over hate. Sometimes, as Elora Finch waited through the long, breathless hours before sunrise, she believed that a single life could be enough to set change in motion. Sometimes one quiet act of mercy could spark a fire no darkness could fully smother. But dawn arrived not as hope. It came like a sentence, cold and unavoidable. Elora had not slept. Food lay untouched. She only waited as morning light washed Dustreach in pale, unforgiving colors. She dressed carefully in her best gown. If she was to face Judge Alton Crowley, she would meet him standing tall. The knock came precisely at 7. Not Sheriff Knox Rourke this time. Crowley himself stood at her door, flanked by 6 armed men. His silver hair glinted in the morning light like frozen steel, his eyes calm with the confidence of a hunter who knew his prey had nowhere left to run. "Miss Finch," he said smoothly, stepping inside without permission. "You've been very foolish." "I don't know what you mean, Judge Crowley." "No?" He gestured casually. "Then perhaps you can explain why Deputy Calder Voss was found unconscious in your quarters, why there was blood on your floor, why Oren Pikehurst was seen near your building after midnight." Calder stood among the men, his head wrapped in bandages, hatred burning in his eyes. Elora knew at once. He had been told exactly what to say. "I treated an injured animal," she said, lifting her chin. "Deputy Voss arrived drunk. He fell." Crowley laughed softly, the sound sharp and brittle. "An injured animal. How touching. And did this animal walk on 2 legs? Did it speak Apache?" The men tore through her quarters again, this time without restraint. Blood-stained cloth, medical tools, dark strands of hair caught on broken wood. Each piece was placed before Crowley like proof laid upon an altar. "Enough," he said at last. "Where is the boy?" "I don't—" His hand struck her face with brutal force, sending her crashing into the wall. "Enough lies." "You sheltered a murderer," Crowley snarled. "An Apache savage who killed Corbin Halleck. His blood is on your hands." "He was part of the attack," Elora gasped, blood filling her mouth. "You sent boys to murder families." Another blow dropped her to her knees. The room spun. "Search the Ashcroft place," Crowley ordered. "The blacksmith's shop, every building in town. Find him." "No," Elora cried. "I acted alone. They knew nothing." "How loyal," Crowley said, hauling her upright. "And how misplaced." "You have one chance," he whispered. "Tell me where the boy is, and perhaps I show mercy." She met his gaze and saw the certainty of a man who had rewritten truth until he believed it wholly. "I've seen your mercy," she said hoarsely. I've seen it in dead children, stolen land, and fear choking this town. I want no part of it." His face twisted with fury. "Then you will serve as an example." He turned. "Sheriff, arrest her for aiding a fugitive and conspiring against the lawful authority of Dustreach." They dragged her into the street so everyone could see. Faces filled windows, some shocked, some pleased, most simply afraid. Her students stared as their teacher was marched past like a criminal. A platform had already been raised in the square. Not quite a gallows, but close enough. "Citizens of Dustreach," Crowley announced, his voice carrying far. "We stand at a crossroads. Order lies behind us. Chaos ahead, if sentiment replaces strength." He pointed at Elora. "This woman betrayed your children. She chose savages over her own people." "Liar!" Willa Ashcroft's voice cut through the crowd. She pushed forward with Orrin Pikehurst beside her. "Corbin Halleck died attacking peaceful families. This is greed, not justice." "Arrest them," Crowley said calmly. "Corruption spreads like disease." The deputies moved, but Orrin fought back. 2 men fell before Sheriff Rourke smashed a rifle butt into his skull. Willa screamed as her husband collapsed, blood spilling onto the dirt. Crowley turned back to the crowd. "You see? This is what false compassion brings. Disorder. Violence. The influence of savages poisons even decent folk." And Dustreach watched, silent, trembling, as cruelty tightened its grip on the town. Dr. Silas Wendell stepped forward, old, stiff with age, but unshackled by fear. "Judge Alton Crowley," he said, voice steady. "This has gone far enough. These are decent people." "Decent people don't shelter killers," Crowley replied. "Decent people don't defy lawful authority." His pale eyes swept the square. "Anyone else care to confess their sympathies?" Silence fell heavy, as earth on a coffin. Parents pulled children tight. Men who had once whispered doubts now studied their boots. Fear claimed the ground, as it always did. Crowley turned back to Elora Finch. "Last chance. Tell me where the savage is, and you may yet escape the full measure of justice." Elora thought of Keme, the wounded boy who spoke of bridges and kindness, hidden in darkness, clinging to breath. She thought of his mother and infant sister, tucked away in cold stone caves, waiting for a reunion that might never come. "I taught my students that this country stands for justice," she said, her words clear despite the swelling at her mouth. "That every life has worth, no matter where it begins. That strength does not make right." She looked to the children in the crowd. "I still believe that, and I pray you'll remember it, whether you remember me or not." "Moving," Crowley sneered, "but words won't save you. Since you refuse sense, river justice, the old way, let the black water decide." A shudder passed through the crowd. River justice, an ancient cruelty, bound and cast into floodwater. Drown, and you were guilty. Live, and God had spoken. With the river swollen by storms, it was no trial at all, only a sentence. "You can't," Willa Ashcroft cried, fighting the men restraining her. "That's murder." "This is justice," Crowley corrected. "Frontier justice for frontier crimes." He smiled at Elora. She thought of Philadelphia, the safety she had left behind, of her sister's pleading letters, of every moment she could have stayed quiet, taught only what Crowley approved, looked away. "I have nothing to say to you," she told him, "except that history will know you for what you are, a frightened man who built power on innocent graves." A blow from behind dropped her to her knees. Her ears rang as Crowley's voice cut through. "Take her to the river. Let everyone see what becomes of agitators and Indian lovers." They hauled her upright, faces blurred as she was dragged toward the edge of town, some wet with tears, others turned away. No one intervened. The river announced itself before it appeared, roaring, swollen, alive. Muddy water churned with trees and stone, a mouth made to swallow. The banks filled with witnesses eager or afraid. They bound her wrists behind her back. Her ankles followed, tight enough to steal hope. "Any last words?" Crowley asked, savoring the moment. Elora searched the crowd and found her students. "Remember," she called, "hate is taught. It isn't born. Remember dignity. Remember that doing right is worth any price." "Enough," Crowley snapped. He nodded to Sheriff Knox Rourke. "Do it." Rourke and another man lifted her to the brink. Below, the black water raged. "Wait!" a small voice cried. Elswyn Moore broke free, tears streaking her face. "Please, don't! She's a good teacher. She never hurt anyone." "Get that child back," Crowley ordered. But something cracked. A few voices joined. Pleas for mercy, for sense. "Silence!" Crowley roared. "Watch or share her fate." For an instant, doubt flickered in his eyes. Then it vanished. "Throw her in." Time stretched thin. Hands pressed her back. The fall came. Then the shock. Ice closing like a fist. The current seized her, spun her, dragged her under. As darkness folded in, her last clear thought was not of dying, but of living. Of Keme hidden and breathing, of children who might yet learn compassion, of small mercies that could grow. She had planted seeds. Perhaps that would be enough. The black water swallowed her, dragging Elora Finch into its roaring core. On the bank, Judge Alton Crowley stood rigid with triumph, while Dustreach folk watched in a hush, thick with horror and shame. Willa Ashcroft crumpled against her husband, her cry lost to the river's thunder. Children taught to fear had just seen their gentle teacher condemned for mercy. Yet in a root cellar across town, an Apache boy named Kem still breathed, proof that care could endure even here. And somewhere among the crowd, a few hearts shifted, turning quietly against the man who ruled by terror. The river had taken Elora, but her words lingered like seed beneath the soil, waiting. The flood was death made flesh, a brown serpent that seized her bound body and hauled her under. Icy water burned her lungs as the current slammed her into hidden stone, each blow knocking the last air from her chest. Light fractured into sparks that weren't stars, but the edge of oblivion. Then, through the roar, came a cry, sharp, fierce, alive. A shadow cut across the sky, plunging from the bluff with the grace of a hawk and the force of a storm. Strong arms wrapped her, hauling her upward toward breath that felt impossibly far away. Her rescuer fought the current with brutal skill, angling them into a quiet eddy near the far bank. Elora slipped toward darkness, her body slack. They struck a sandbar, hard, jarring, blessedly solid. He dragged her onto the narrow strip, hidden by willow curtains. Through water-blurred sight, she saw him. An Apache warrior, hair slicked to bronze skin, eyes locked with fierce resolve. He cut her bonds in swift strokes, rolled her to her side as river water poured from her mouth. But she did not breathe. He pressed an ear to her chest, tilted her head, and without hesitation sealed his mouth over hers, breathing life back into drowning lungs. Once, twice, 3 times. His hands worked her chest between breaths. Any other moment might have scandalized. Here, only life mattered. At last she convulsed, coughed, drew a ragged breath. Relief flickered across his face as she gasped, water spilling free. "You saved me," she whispered, raw and shaking. "You saved Keme," he answered in careful English. "My sister's son. I am Tyan. I watched the town, waited for a chance to find him. Understanding cut through her shock. This was the boy's uncle, one of the survivors. He had seen them cast her into the river and risked everything. "Keme is alive," Elora said. "Hidden, safe." Tyan's composure cracked. "My brother. Dead. Many dead. My sister, the baby, some others. We hide, wait, plan." He studied her, dark eyes sharp with thought. "You are the teacher who waved. Kame spoke of you before the attack." Shouts carried from the far bank. Crowley's spur were following the water, searching for a body. Tyan lifted her easily, despite the drag of soaked cloth. "Come. Not safe." He slipped into the willows, moving along paths only he knew. Cold and shock stole her strength. The world blinked in and out, trees, sky, the steady rhythm of his breath. When she woke fully, she lay on furs inside a small cave. A fire crackled, smoke threading up a natural chimney. A buffalo robe wrapped her. Her clothes steamed on frames nearby. Survival overruled propriety. Tyan sat across the flames, stirring a clay pot. Dry buckskins, hair rebraided, every inch a warrior, eyes gentle as well as strong. "Drink," he said. "Medicine tea, warm inside." Bitter heat spread through her. He spoke, measured and steady. "Keme is strong, like his father." Pain crossed his face. "My brother believed in peace, said whites and Apache must learn to live together." "Judge Crowley," Elora said, the pattern snapping into place. "He used fear to steal?" "Yes," Tyan replied. "He pretended friendship, traded, then wanted our land, our water. He paid bad men to raid us at night. Women, children, elders, no difference." His jaw tightened. "I was hunting. Returned to—" He stopped. "Found Keem in the river, as you were. Brought him toward town because nowhere else remained. I hoped—" He gestured to her. "Someone like you." Outside, the night held its breath. Inside the cave, firelight and quiet courage kept time. 2 lives pulled back from the flood, and a reckoning begun. "There are others in town who want to help," Elora Finch said urgently. "The Ashcrofts are hiding Keem. Orrin Pikehurst, Dr. Silas Wendell, they're good people. They only need direction. They need hope." "Hope?" Tyan let out a low, bitter laugh. "What hope stands against a man like Judge Alton Crowley? He has guns, badges, and fear. We have nothing. We have truth," Elora pressed. "And now we have witnesses. I've seen Kame's wounds. I've heard what was done. Others know Crowley's lies. If we could reach federal authorities, the same authorities who want our land—" Tyan shook his head. "No, teacher. Justice does not live in their courts." Silence settled between them, broken only by the fire's quiet snap. Elora pulled the buffalo robe closer, aware not just of her bare skin beneath it, but of how fully her life rested in the hands of a man who had every reason to despise her world. "Why save me?" she asked at last. "Your family is gone. Your people are hunted. Why risk yourself for a white woman?" For a long moment, Tyan did not answer. Then he spoke softly. When Keme spoke of the teacher who waved, his eyes changed. "First light I had seen since my brother died. You gave him hope when you owed him nothing. Among my people, that creates honor." "There is no debt," Elora said. "There is," he replied firmly. "Not everyone would do what you did." "You're wrong," she said. "Anyone should." "Not anyone," Tyan answered. "You chose what was right when it cost everything. That is warrior courage." He met her gaze across the fire. "My brother would say you have an Apache heart in a white body." The words warmed her more than the tea. They spoke as the light faded. Of Keme, of the survivors in hiding, of the impossible snare tightening around Dustreach. Tyan told her of Apache ties to the land Crowley coveted. She told him of Philadelphia, of classrooms, and the belief that learning could mend broken worlds. "A foolish dream," he said gently. "All good dreams are foolish," she answered, "until they're real." Exhaustion finally claimed her. The last thing she heard was Tyan's voice, low and steady, singing in his language. A prayer, perhaps, or a lullaby. Despite everything, the violence, the river, the fear, she slept. She woke deep in the night to see him standing guard at the cave mouth, his silhouette cut against the stars. Another robe covered her. The fire had been tended. He had not slept. "You should rest," she whispered. "Soon," he said. "First we plan. We cannot stay. Crowley's spur will search harder now. We must move you somewhere safe. We must return Keem to his mother." "I won't leave without him," Elora said. "Stubborn woman," Tyan replied, and there was approval in his tone. "Like Apache women, they also ignore sense." She smiled. "Then we'll need a plan that doesn't depend on sense." He turned fully toward her, firelight tracing his features. "There is a way. Dangerous. It requires trust." "You saved my life," she said. "You have my trust." "And you saved Kem," he answered. "You have mine." "My sister and the others hide in sacred caves," he continued. "A protected place. To take you there would reveal our refuge to a white woman. Some will say I betray my people." He studied her face. "I believe you are different. Perhaps you are the bridge my brother dreamed of." The weight of that trust settled on her shoulders. "I swear to you," Elora said quietly, "on my life, I will never betray your people." He nodded once. "Then tomorrow night, we go. We gather Keme and those who helped. We bring them all to the caves. From there—" He lifted a shoulder. "From there, we see." They planned until dawn. Tyan drew paths in the dirt, routes in and out of dust reach, blind spots, dangers. Elora mapped the town from memory. Who could be trusted? Who could not? When the first gray light touched the sky, Tyan smothered the fire. "Time. Crowley will hunt harder today. We must stay ahead." He gave her dry clothes, her mended dress reinforced with Apache layers for warmth. As she changed behind a robe-hung screen, Elora marveled at how swiftly her life had overturned. Days ago she had been a proper Philadelphia schoolteacher. Now she was a fugitive, a rule-breaker, trusting an Apache warrior with her life. When she stepped out, Tyan had packed their supplies. He looked her over. White woman reshaped by survival, and nodded. "Now you look like one who endures," he said. "Come, the journey is long." At the cave mouth, Elora paused and looked back once, at the place where she had been pulled from death and remade. Then she turned and followed Tyan into the breaking day. The river had tried to take her, yet instead it delivered Elora Finch into something larger than fear, a purpose sharpened by loss and resolve. A chance to become the bridge both she and Tyan's brother had once imagined. Tyan moved ahead, reading the land as if it spoke to him. Every step was measured, every pause intentional. Elora followed without hesitation, knowing the woman who had arrived in Dustreach as a timid Eastern schoolteacher no longer existed. The Blackwater had stripped her down and remade her. What walked now was someone tempered by cold water and firelight, bound by intent and a growing trust in the warrior who had breathed life back into her. Their path led straight into danger, yet for the first time since she reached Wyoming territory, Elora knew where she belonged, between two worlds, fighting for both, sheltered by a warrior's honor and her own unyielding belief that compassion could outlast hate. Even here, even now, in a land where death came swift and justice bent to the strongest hand, The sacred caves lay hidden in a canyon so cleverly veiled that Elora might have passed it a dozen times without seeing the opening. Tyan guided her through a narrow fissure between towering stone walls. Their horses were concealed in cottonwoods below. Inside, the passage widened into a series of natural chambers warmed by fires and shielded from the wind. The people clustered in quiet groups, perhaps 30 souls, mostly women, children, and elders. Faces lifted as Tyan entered. Hope flickered, then hardened into suspicion when they saw Elora behind him. "You bring an enemy into our sacred place," an elder woman said, rising with grief carved deep into her face. "She saved an Apache child, grandmother," Tyan answered with respect. "They threw her into the river for mercy. She is no enemy." A younger woman stepped forward with a baby on her hip, her features mirroring Tyan's strength and resolve. This was his sister, Anoki. "My son," she whispered. "You found him." "Alive," Elora said, stepping closer. "Hidden with good people in town. We're bringing Keme to you." Anoki's composure broke. She pressed the baby into another woman's arms and clasped Elora's hands, tears spilling freely. "You saved my boy." "He saved himself," Elora said gently. "He's brave, like his father, like his uncle." Anoki drew Elora toward the fire, urging her to eat, to rest, to speak. The others gathered near as the story unfolded. An elder translated for those who didn't know English. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Murmurs rose. When Elora spoke of standing before Judge Alton Crowley, some even tapped their palms in quiet approval. "You have courage," the elder woman conceded. "Foolish courage, but courage. One good white woman does not erase what others have done." "No," Elora agreed. "But one, then another, then another. Maybe that's how something better begins. There are people in Dustreach who want to help. They need—" "Warriors to die for them?" a young man interrupted, his arm bound from the raid. "We've lost enough." "Justice," Elora said firmly. "Real justice, not Crowley's theater. For that we need witnesses, testimony and proof so clear even distant authorities cannot ignore it." Tyan, silent until now, spoke. "Hiding keeps us alive today, but it solves nothing. Crowley grows stronger. He takes more land. Soon there will be nowhere left to hide." Anoki looked between them. "Then what do you propose?" They planned through the night, shaping something that felt impossible, a challenge to Crowley's rule built on truth, white and Apache voices together. It would demand courage from Dustreach folk who had helped in secret, and trust from the people who had every reason to expect betrayal. "The Ashcrofts will help," Elora said. "Dr. Silas Wendell has influence back east. Orrin Pikehurst commands respect among workers. If we bring proof of murders, of lies, if, the elder woman spat. "If wishes were horses, we'd all ride free." But Anoki nodded slowly. "My husband believed in law, in words and papers. He thought they could protect us." Her voice hardened. "He was wrong. But maybe his way and the warrior's way together." By dawn, a plan stood. Elora and Tyan would return to Dustreach under cover of night, retrieve Keem and gather anyone willing to stand against Crowley. Anoki would prepare testimony from survivors, documenting the unprovoked attack and the truth Crowley tried to bury with bullets. As Elora and Tyan readied to leave, he said quietly, "This is dangerous." "If we're caught," Elora replied, steady, "we've both already died once." "What's left to fear?" Tyan said with a rare smile that softened the hard lines of his face. "You speak like an Apache woman now. Soon you'll tell me of visions." They traveled on. Their talk drifted away from plans and danger and into the shape of living. He told her of boyhood on the plains, buffalo hunts, winter counts, the sacred stories his grandmother carried like fire. She spoke of Philadelphia's stone streets, of her father's medical rounds, of the books that formed her dream of teaching. "Different worlds," he said as they watered the horses at a hidden spring. "Not so different," Elora answered. "Both hold families who love their children, people who seek justice, dreamers who imagine better days." He studied her then, an unreadable look in his eyes. "My brother would have liked you. He gathered bridges, words between tongues, shared stories, anything that joined people. I thought him naive." His voice lowered. "Now I think he saw farther than the rest of us." They reached the edge of Dust Reach as full dark fell. The town looked smaller to Elora now, meaner, a knot of fear and greed wearing the mask of order. Yet a few windows glowed, the Ashcrofts', Dr. Silas Wendell's, the blacksmith shop where Orrin Pikehurst often worked late. "I'll go to the Ashcrofts first," she whispered. "Get Kame, explain the plan." "I come with you." "No," she said. "You're too visible, too valuable." She turned, and he caught her arm. "Elora?" It was the first time he used her given name. "Be careful. You've died once for my people. Do not make it twice." The intensity in his gaze stole her breath. She laid her hand over his. "I'll be careful. Wait for my signal. 2 lanterns in the church tower means it's safe." She slipped into shadow. Every nerve sang. The Ashcroft house was dark except for a single candle in the kitchen window. Willa's sign. Elora tapped the coded knock. Willa Ashcroft pulled her inside, shaking. "We thought," everyone said, "you drowned." "Nearly. Where's Keme?" "Still in the cellar. Elora, it's been awful. Crowley's gone mad. He's arrested 3 more families for sympathies. He's planning something terrible." "Then we're out of time." Elora laid out the plan in quick, urgent words. Willa's face blanched, then hardened. "Yes," she said. "Orrin feels the same. We won't live under this tyrant anymore." She called softly, and Orrin Pikehurst emerged, moving stiffly from his beating. His eyes widened. "Lord be praised." "There's no time," Elora said. "Are you with us?" "I am, and others will be. The Quinns have had enough. Little Elswyn Moore hasn't stopped crying since they threw you in. The Talons, too, once they learned the truth about their boy's part in that raid." His jaw set. Men are starting to see Crowley for what he is. They brought Kem up from the cellar. He clung to Elora, sobbing with relief. His wounds were healing under Willa's care, and his eyes shone when she told him of his mother and uncle. "Uncle Tyan is here," he whispered. "Alive?" "Very alive," Elora said, "and waiting to take you home." While Orrin gathered allies, Elora and Willa prepared Kime for the journey. Warm clothes, food for strength. The boy was weak but resolute, burning to reunite with his family. "Teacher," he asked softly, "they said you died for me. Why?" Elora knelt. "Because every life has value, Kem. Because your father's dream of peace is worth fighting for. Because sometimes we must stand against evil, even when we're afraid." "Were you afraid?" "Terrified," she admitted. "But doing right while afraid, that's courage." One by one, the allies arrived. Dr. Silas Wendell came first, bag in hand, eyes grim. "I've documented everything, the false charges, the murders. If this reaches federal eyes, it cannot be ignored. Then others, few, but more than Elora dared hope. Even Calder Voss slipped in, bruised and ashamed. "The judge went too far," he muttered. "Throwing a woman in the river, planning to burn out the rest of the people. It ain't right. My ma didn't raise me for that." "Redemption comes to those who seek it," Willa said gently. Outside, The town slept under lies. Inside, a small circle of resolve tightened. Quiet, dangerous, and finally awake. They moved toward the church, where Elora Finch climbed the narrow steps and lit 2 lanterns in the tower. Their glow cut through the dark like twin eyes. Within moments, Tyan emerged from the night, silent as drifting ash. Several Dustreach folk gasped, hands twitching toward pistols. "Peace," Elora said quickly. "He's with us. Kaim's uncle." The reunion was brief and fierce. Tyan's composed exterior fractured as he wrapped his arms around his nephew, murmuring prayers of gratitude in his own tongue. Then he turned, steady again, facing the townspeople. "You risk much," he said simply. "Why?" Orrin Pikehurst stepped forward. "Because we've been cowards too long. Because what Crowley did to your people, he'll do to any of us once we're in his way. And because it's right." Tyan studied each face, measuring fear against resolve. At last, he nodded. "Then we stand together." "Dawn is close," he added. "We must be gone before Judge Alton Crowley learns his town has turned." As they readied to leave, Elora glanced back at the dark schoolhouse where everything had begun. Empty now, but in her mind she saw children at the windows, White and Apache together, learning side by side, building the bridge Kem's father had dreamed of. "We'll return," Tyan said softly beside her. "When Crowley falls. When justice comes." "Together," she answered. The word settled into her bones like a vow. They rode out into the night, teacher and warrior, White and Apache, bound by purpose and a fragile, growing trust. Behind them, Dustreach slept uneasily beneath Crowley's iron rule. But change was already moving, carried on the wind like seed, fed by courage and sacrifice. The bridge between worlds had begun. One life, one choice, one act of faith at a time. The plan took shape in the sacred caves over 2 days of relentless preparation. Dr. Silas Wendell worked with Anoki to record testimonies while Elora translated. Names, dates, wounds, deaths, every detail captured. Orrin and the other townsmen memorized Dustreach's weak points from Tyan's scouting. Timing would be everything. There would be no second chance. "Crowley keeps papers in his study," Caldervoss admitted at last, shame still heavy in his voice. "Forged land deeds, orders for raids, letters from buyers back east who want Apache land." "If we could get those," Orrin began. "Too dangerous," he finished. "That house is a fortress." "Not during fire," Tyan said quietly. "When flames threaten, even fortress empties." The plan hardened. A diversion big enough to draw Crowley's spur away. Free the Apache families held in the jail. Secure the documents. Vanish before Crowley understood he'd been outplayed. "The grain warehouse," Dr. Wendell suggested. "Far from homes, but valuable enough he can't ignore it. Full of wheat this time of year." "I'll do it," Calder said quickly. "I know the guards' patterns." On the chosen night, darkness fell heavy and still. Tyan's band concealed themselves near the jail. The Dustreach folk slipped into assigned positions. Elora and Willa Ashcroft would enter Crowley's house once the chaos began. 2 women, less likely to be seen as threats. At midnight, a red glow bloomed on the eastern edge of town. The warehouse erupted in flame. The firebell screamed. Men poured into the streets. Crowley's voice rang out, sharp with command, driving bucket brigades toward the blaze. "Now," Tyan whispered. Shadows moved toward the jail. Elora and Willa hurried through emptied streets to Crowley's mansion. The front door stood open, servants gone to fight the fire. They slipped inside. Willa kept watch while Elora entered the study. The room stank of cigar smoke and self-importance. A massive desk, leather chairs, Shelves of books Crowley likely never read, props in his performance of civilization. She went straight for the desk drawers. Locked. Her hands shook as she worked the pins Oren had shown her, ears straining. The first drawer held harmless letters. The second, a ledger of bribes paid to territorial officials. The third made her breath catch. Maps marking Apache camps for destruction. Lists of families to be relocated or erased. Forged reports of attacks that never happened. And worst of all, signed orders to hired killers, payments detailed for murders disguised as Apache raids. "Elora, hurry!" Willa hissed. She stuffed documents into a leather satchel, grabbing everything she could carry. As she turned to leave, her eye caught a small painting on the wall. A boy stood frozen in the study, no more than 15, wearing Judge Alton Crowley's pale eyes and a cruel curl to his mouth. Thane Crowley, the son whose drunken brawl and bloody end had ignited his father's spiral into vengeance. Footsteps thudded on the porch. No time for the front door. Elora Finch seized Willa Ashcroft's hand and dragged her through the kitchen. They burst into the garden as voices flooded the house behind them. At the jail, Tyan's rescue was already unfolding. The few guards left had been overwhelmed. Cell doors yawned open. Apache prisoners, mostly young men seized on lies, stumbled into the night. Among them was Nokosi, Keme's older cousin. Weeks of chains hadn't dulled his first question. "Is the boy safe?" "He is," Tyan said. "The white teacher saved him." Nokosi's gaze locked onto Elora as she and Willa arrived, breathless from their escape. "You're the one who defied Crowley?" "We all did," Elora panted, lifting the satchel. "And now we have proof." The victory shattered with a shout from the warehouse. The fire was dying. Crowley would soon see through the ruse. Worse, hoofbeats thundered beyond the glow. Reinforcements. Riders Crowley had summoned days earlier to finish the Indian problem. "Go," Oren Pikehurst urged, stepping from shadow. "Get to the caves. We'll slow them." "You'll be cut down," Tyan said. "Maybe," Oren replied. "But someone has to stay. Someone has to bear witness." He gripped Tyan's arm. "This is our fight now. Go." They fled into darkness, Apache and white together, outlaws under Crowley's law, bound by a single purpose. Behind them, Dustreach erupted as Crowley discovered empty cells, stolen papers. His grip cracked. They reached the town's edge when riders burst from the dark, blocking the way. Sheriff Knox Rourke led them, torchlight twisting his face with rage. "Running somewhere, lover of Indians?" he snarled at Elora. "Thought you drowned like the rat you are." "Let them pass, Knox." Dr. Silas Wendell stepped forward, rifle raised. Behind him stood Oren and a dozen townsmen. "It's over. We know the truth," Wendell said, "about Crowley's murders." "Truth?" Rourke laughed. "Truth is whatever Crowley says." A shot cracked from behind him. One of Rourke's deputies, Breck Talon, had turned his gun on a rider drawing down on the doctor. "No more killing," Breck shouted. "My brother died for Crowley's lies. No more." The night exploded. Gunfire tore the air. Crowley's loyalists clashed with those who'd turned. Tyan threw Elora to the ground, covering her as bullets screamed overhead. Willa screamed when Oren took a round in the shoulder and kept fighting. Through the chaos, Elora saw him, Judge Alton Crowley himself, arriving with more men, his face carved from cold fury. His eyes found hers. Murder lived there. "Kill them all," he roared. "Every savage, every traitor." War cries answered him from the hills. Anoki had come, with Tyan's band, warriors who'd waited, hidden, patient. They swept down not to slaughter, but to free their kin and protect the whites who'd risked everything. The fight raged through Dustreach. The general store became a fortress for Crowley's spur. The church filled with wounded from both sides, Willa working feverishly, saving lives without asking allegiance. And at the center, Crowley raged like a demon, firing at anything that moved, shouting about civilization and beasts. It was Nokosi who ended it. Weakened by chains, burning with purpose, he tackled Crowley from behind. They rolled in the dirt, grappling for the gun. The shot froze time. Crowley staggered, clutching his chest where his own bullet bloomed red. He stared at the stain, astonished, as if death had never been meant for him. "You," he rasped, collapsing to his knees. His eyes found Elora. "You brought savagery to paradise." "No," she said softly, standing over him. "You brought hatred where peace was possible. You made the savagery you claimed to fight." Judge Alton Crowley died in the dust of the town he'd ruled by fear, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. His last sight was red and white, standing together against his legacy. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Rourke and a handful of diehards fled into the night. Those who remained lowered their weapons, stunned by their leader's death and by the proof of his crimes laid bare. Dawn was breaking, washing Dustreach in pale light mixed with blood and fragile hope. "It's over," Tyon said quietly, helping Elora Finch back to her feet. "No," she answered, her eyes moving over the scene below, wounded men being treated without regard to skin or language, former enemies sharing water, Kimi clinging to his freed cousin with tearful laughter. "It's just beginning." Dr. Silas Wendell, his arm bandaged but his mind already racing, took charge. "We must alert the federal marshals at once. These papers have to reach honest authorities before Crowley's allies bury the truth." "I'll go," Breck Talon said, his voice still shaking. "I know where to find lawmen who won't sell their souls. My brother would want this made right." As the sun climbed, Dustreach looked reborn. The jail stood empty, its door hanging crooked like a broken tooth. Judge Alton Crowley's mansion was searched room by room, yielding even more evidence of corruption. In the streets where hatred had once ruled, white settlers and the people worked side by side, tending wounds and clearing wreckage. Elora stood with Tyon on the hill overlooking town, the same rise where she had first seen Dustreach months before. So much loss, so much pain. And yet, something new was stirring. "Your brother's dream," she said softly. "It's possible now." "Because of you," Tyon replied. "You built the first bridge." "We built it together." He looked at her then, this warrior who had pulled her from death and stood with her against tyranny. A rare smile crossed his face. "My brother was right. You carry a Lakota heart." Then, more quietly, "And perhaps this Lakota has learned something of white courage as well." Below them, Willa Ashcroft organized a communal meal, insisting that everyone sit together. Orrin Pikehurst, his arm in a sling but his resolve intact, was already talking about fair councils and shared labor. Children ran between both groups, their laughter rising like a promise. The battle for Dustreach was finished. The harder work, building a true community, had only begun. Spring came like a benediction. 6 months after Crowley's fall, Dustreach scarcely resembled the town once ruled by fear. Where signs had barred Indians, new boards welcomed all honest traders. The old jail, its bars removed, served as an annex to the school. Elora stood in the doorway of the schoolhouse, watching her students take their seats. Not only white children now, the people sat beside them. Elswyn Moore shared a reader with a Lakota girl. Lura helped young Jedrick Fenn with his arithmetic. "Good morning," Elora called. 24 voices answered, some in English, some in Lakota, all together. The federal inquiry had been relentless. The documents Breck delivered exposed corruption reaching the territorial capital, including stolen water rights Crowley had killed to claim. A new treaty followed, guaranteeing coexistence and legal standing for both communities. Yet the deepest changes were not written on paper. Oren's forge employed workers from both peoples. Dr. Wendell apprenticed Anoki, blending traditional healing with modern medicine. Willa's church sang hymns in 2 languages, and no one found it strange. After lessons, Elora walked to the river, the same black water that had nearly taken her life. Spring runoff had gentled its rage. Wildflowers lined the banks. She often came to remember how much could change. She felt, rather than heard, Tyan step beside her. "The council meets tonight," he said. "Some still argue for separation." "And you?" she asked. He watched the water a long moment. "I argue for bridges. Separation breeds fear. Fear breeds hate. Only together do we last." "Together," she echoed. Over these months, their shared struggle had grown into something deeper, quiet, steady, unspoken, and strong as the land itself. The warrior who had dragged her from the river and stood beside her against tyranny had become far more than an ally. Elora felt it in the quiet moments, the way Tyan lingered near the schoolhouse, the way his gaze softened when he watched her teach. She also knew, from the steady attention in his eyes, that the feeling was not hers alone. "Elora," he said now, turning fully toward her. "Tonight my people will ask about the future. They will ask whether whites can truly change, whether they can ever see us as equals. What should I tell them?" "Tell them about Elswyn Moore," Elora replied. "About how she refused to eat until Lura was allowed to sit beside her. Tell them about Calder Voss, who now keeps watch near the people's camp so no trouble comes their way. Tell them about this town. Flawed, wounded, but trying to build something new from the ashes of hate. And tell them about the teacher who began it," Tyan said quietly. "The woman who gave everything for an Apache child she did not know." "I gave far less than I received," Elora answered. "I found purpose. I found courage I didn't know I had. I found—" "What?" he asked, stepping closer. "I found you." The kiss came softly, tentative at first, more question than declaration. When Elora answered, her arms slipping around his neck, the doubt between them fell away. The world's objections, difference, history, fear, lost their hold in that moment. When they finally parted, both unsteady with breath, Tyan smiled, that rare smile that always unsettled her heart. "My sister Anoki has been telling me I should speak to you," he admitted. "She says the spirits brought us together, that you were sent to save not only Kem, but all of us." "And what do you say?" Elora asked. "I say Anoki thinks too much like a healer," he replied, cupping Elora's face gently. "But I also say that when a man finds a woman who matches his courage, who fights for justice, who builds bridges where others see only walls, he would be a fool not to cherish her, even if she is white, especially then. We are the bridge," he went on softly. "You and I, from Kame to Elswyn, from the people to the Dustreach folk. This is how the world changes, one heart at a time." That evening, the entire town gathered beneath the open sky. The council met under stars that judged no one, shining equally on red and white. Elders spoke first, urging caution, warning against forgetting old wounds. Then Kame stepped forward, 13 years old, thin from hardship, yet his voice carried clearly. "I speak as one who lost everything," he said in English, then again in Apache. "My father, my home. I should hate all whites, but a white woman saved me. White families hid me. White men fought for my freedom." He looked around the circle. "How can I hate when I have seen such love?" Elsewhen stood beside him. "My pa taught me to fear Indians," she said, her voice shaking. "But Kame shared his food when I had none. Lura braided my hair when I cried. Anoki healed my mother. They're not savages. They're my family." One by one, others rose. Orrin Pikehurst spoke of learning new craft from Apache hands. Dr. Silas Wendell praised medicines that had saved lives when his own had failed. Even Calder Voss spoke, awkward, ashamed, but sincere, of second chances. At last, Tyon stood. "6 months ago, this town ran red with blood," he said. "Hatred ruled, and my people died for a white man's greed. I wanted vengeance. I wanted the plains to burn as ours had burned." His eyes found Elora across the fire. "Then I saved a drowning woman, and she saved my soul. She showed me another way. Not forgetting. We must never forget, but forgiving. Building. Choosing hope over hate." He reached for Elora's hand. After only a breath's hesitation, she stepped beside him. "This woman will be my wife," Tyon said, his voice steady. Gasps rippled through the crowd, not despite our differences, but because of what those differences have taught us. We are the living treaty. Our children will belong to both worlds. Silence held them all, heavy with history. Then Anoki began to sing, a blessing for new beginnings. Willa Ashcroft joined with a hymn, and soon voices blended until the night rang with something new. The vote that followed was unanimous. The Treaty of Coexistence was approved, not merely as law, but as promise. Later, slipping away from the celebration, Elora and Tyon stood again by the river, the same black water that had tried to claim her life, and instead delivered her to a new one. "Are you certain?" he asked quietly. "Your family back east will never understand. There will be hardship, prejudice, dangers I cannot always shield you from." "I already died once for what I believe in," Elora said gently. "I'm not afraid to live for it." "And you gave my life back to me. How could I walk any road but this one?" They were married a month later, in a ceremony that wove two worlds together. Elora Finch wore her mother's wedding dress, the pale fabric softened by hand-stitched Apache beadwork that told stories older than any church record. Tyon stood beside her in finely worked buckskins, a simple white man's wedding band resting against his bronze skin, an emblem of choice, not conquest. Kame served as witness, standing proudly between them, with Elswyn Moore at his side, both children shining with the quiet joy of having seen hatred broken by courage. The vows were spoken in two languages, carried by the wind and answered by the gathered voices of the people and the Dustreach folk alike. Life did not become perfect, but it became honest. The school grew. Anoki taught language, memory, and history, alongside Elora's lessons in reading and arithmetic. Children learned to count in English and Apache, to read the land as well as the page. Trade followed trust. Hands once raised in fear now worked side by side. Dustreach Falls came to be spoken of across the territory as a place where impossible things took root, where justice meant more than the strong ruling the weak, where law bent toward conscience, and where former enemies chose community over vengeance. As years passed, the fighting days faded behind them. Elora and Tyon would sit by the black water with their children, bright, fearless souls who moved easily between both worlds, carrying two languages, two histories, and one unbroken sense of belonging. They told their children the truth, how hatred had nearly destroyed everything, how fear had worn the mask of order, and how love, stubborn, costly, and deeply human, had built something better from the wreckage. They always ended the same way. Bridges between people are not raised by governments or signed into being by treaties. They are built by individual hearts brave enough to reach across a divide, by teachers who wave at children regardless of skin or story, by warriors who choose mercy over blood, by ordinary people who dare to love extraordinarily. The black water flowed on, carrying that story downstream, carrying it beyond the plains, beyond Dust Reach Falls, whispering to other towns and other hearts that even in the darkest places, even when the odds seem unforgiving, compassion can outlast cruelty, understanding can outlive ignorance, and love, always love, can conquer hate. That was what Alora Finch learned on her journey from an Eastern classroom to the wild edge of the frontier. That beneath every difference lies the same hope: safety for our children, justice for our people, and someone willing to stand beside us when the river rises. And sometimes, if we are brave enough, we find that person in the most unexpected place. And together, we build a bridge no flood of prejudice can ever wash away. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso Legal. Disclaimer: these stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deep fakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.